Here on Chartbusting 80s with Ross Wilson. Ross, thanks for taking time out to join us on the show.
My pleasure.
Now, Ross, you've had such an illustrious career in the music industry. What was your background before you started Daddy Cool?
Well, I started up my first group when I was still at school and got totally into that, and so my studies sort of suffered a bit. But we had charted a record in 1965, a version of the old Chestnut Louie Louie, with my group, the Pink Finks. And then there was like 5 or 6 years of struggle and nothing happening, but a lot of evolution going on. And a group that I had called the Party Machine, that's where we started writing a lot of original material. And out of that group came both myself and Ross Hannaford of Daddy Cool, and also Mike Rudd, who went on to have Spectrum and I'll Be Gone and those things. So it was quite an important group, the Party Machine. But no one really got to hear of us that much until Daddy Cool.
Excellent. Now, you've started up Daddy Cool. When you first started it up, like any band, where did you see your future in the music industry? Did you think you'd release some songs and have a bit of fun, or did you see a future in the industry?
Oh, well, I had a day job. I was interested in music most of all, but I just got back from a trip overseas where I played with some people over in England. And then I had a big adventure coming home on the hippie trail through Asia, and, you know, it was fantastic, but no money. So I got used to not having any money, and I was just working in a book warehouse, and I met the drummer from Daddy Cool there, Gary Young. He was also in between gigs, and he knew Wayne Duncan, the bass player, and I knew Ross Hannaford, the guitarist, and that's how Daddy Cool evolved. The great thing about Daddy Cool was we didn't actually have a plan. It was more just get together and play the music. It was kind of an accident, I think, and I was just interested in old doo-wop music and blues music and putting all that together, plus some of the songs that I'd written, like Eagle Rock. And it just fell together. It was the right guys, and it was just one of those magic things that happened, you know.
How was the opportunities like in the music industry in the 70s?
Well, the great thing was it wasn't the big sort of top-heavy monster it is now, where A&R guys these days seem to be people who are there to say no rather than to sign people up. It wasn't that hard to get a record made, because if there was anything happening at all, you could at least get a single out on one of the major labels, and then whether you had any more singles, that was another thing. But Daddy Cool kind of broke the mold a bit in that we signed with a new independent company and straight away went into and made an album. Before, we didn't just do the usual thing, was make a single, then another single. So we had the Eagle Rock single out, and that went to #1, and then we already had an album in the works. And that's why I think it happened so quickly for us, because we were playing by a new set of rules, you know, and sort of setting the agenda as well. Our managers were pretty smart guys.
Excellent. Now, Eagle Rock, of course, was the big one for Daddy Cool. When you wrote that, did you think it would become as successful as what it was? Because it's still being played now, and you're still...
Well, no, I mean, I would never imagine that it would still be around in the way it is today. I mean, we always had that song targeted as, we thought this is the one that's going to, you know, do something for us, and we put probably more work into that track than we did in the other ones on the album. And, you know, it did very well straight away, but, you know, you can't foresee that, what is it, 30 years later, that it's still, you know, one of the big anthems of the nation. So, like, pretty happy about that. It did prove to be the foundation that I was able to, like, build on from there on, you know.
Now, we've moved on to the 80s, and the opportunity to now front another band comes up. Now, we've spoken to many artists that have been in established bands and have gone on to solo work, but you've now fronted another band. How did that opportunity come about?
Well, I was like working with group, because just from the interplay between musicians, that's what I think music's all about, you know. And I put together, after that Oz soundtrack thing, I started to feel like I'd wanted to get back on stage more often, and that's when I put together Mondo Rock. Now, Mondo Rock just happened sporadically for a few years, and it's kind of like I have the bands I have now. There's a pool of musicians I draw on, and it's basically a Ross Wilson thing. And then after a while, Mondo Rock evolved into a more permanent lineup, and we started touring more, and we started making records. But then after about two years with this one particular lineup, I thought it was time for a change, and that's when, after the first album, I changed the lineup, and that's when I hooked up with Eric McCusker as kind of co-writer in that band, and that's when we started having some success, you know.
Now, did you feel, you've had, Mondo Rock's come out now in the 80s, but did you feel that there was sort of pressure or anything because there might have been that comparison to the success of Daddy Cool, or?
Yeah, absolutely. For the first couple of years of Mondo Rock, we didn't play Eagle Rock, for instance, because I felt that it was the music in Mondo Rock was so different from the Daddy Cool music, which is Daddy Cool, had a lot of like rock revival flavour to it, as well as the songs we wrote ourselves. It was sort of angling back to the 50s kind of thing, and whereas the Mondo Rock was more akin to the earlier groups I'd had, like Party Machine. We were writing totally all our new stuff in a contemporary vein. So rather than bow into the pressure of you got to play Eagle Rock every night, I thought it important that we establish our own credentials. So I didn't play it for a couple of years until we had a couple of runs on the board ourselves, and then we would stick it in the encore, and everyone was happy, But people got to know that I wasn't going to do it, and they just had to accept Mondo Rock for what it was, and I don't regret doing that. These days I play Eagle Rock every night because I've got enough runs on the board. I can mix it all up together, Yeah.
Now, we've talked about how the music industry and opportunities were like in the 70s, but how were they like in the 80s? Like, a lot of artists have mentioned Countdown as a really good outlet. What other things in the 80s were?
Well, the great thing about the 80s was I look on it, and not just because of the involvement and success I had in the 80s, but I think it was a particularly kind of good age for Australian music. There was just one group after another that were able to have one-hit records of their own material, and it was a refining of everything that had come before. And so you had Mantles, Anything, Split Ends, Mondo Rock, Ice House, one of the Angels, Rose Tattooers, all playing really different music from one another, but still able to connect on that kind of hit level as well. Cold Chisel and Midnight Oil, who had the political agenda and still made fantastic music. So I look very fondly on that period, and I think we've lost a bit of that now, unfortunately. One of the reasons it happened so well was you did have Countdown as an instant outlet, and you did have an immense amount of live work was available too. Like, we just never stopped touring, We'd take a break every now and again and then make a record and then go out again, and had no trouble playing 5-6 nights a week all around the nation. I don't think you can do that now.
No, not at all. But you look back at those, like the 70s and 80s, what highlights stood out for you in that time? Well,
it's all in hindsight, but I'm just sort of amazed by the amount of stuff I fitted in. Like, particularly from the very first group I had, but I went off overseas, came back, filmed Daddy Cool, had smash hits, and did Skyhooks, and that all happened in a period of like 5 or 6 years. Then went on to form Mondo Rock. Like, Mondo Rock actually lasted the longest of all the groups, well over a decade, and I just go, wow. So come like the end of the 80s, I actually felt like it was time for a rest.
Now, I'm sure a lot of fans out there would like to know, obviously, once you left Mondo Rock, what you went into, and of course what you're doing now, because you've released a new CD and you're going to go on tour soon, and you've been touring.
Well, pretty fortunate in that whenever I stop one thing, something else seems to pop up. Whether it was, having difficulties with record companies with Daddy Cool, and Skyhooks came along. I was really interested in that. On to Mondo Rock having a long period of success, and then just at the point where I wasn't sure what I was going to do, except that I knew it was time to finish Mondo Rock because our use-by date had expired, basically. Around that time, some other people were recording my songs, specifically John Farnham. Yeah. And then Jimmy Barnes, I mean, at that time were the biggest solo acts in the country, and so actually would sell large amounts of records. So if they recorded one of your songs, it meant something in terms of like earning power. So like I was living in St Kilda and was able to just sort of sit back and let the publishing side of things work for me and do more co-writing. And I still performed a bit. I had one band called Raw that was used to play it out in the Esplanade, but it was a fantastic band. And then I got involved in some sort of jazzy things, and I just sort of did whatever came along. But I wasn't actively promoting myself as a recording artist or on tour. So, and that all changed around the time that I got married again, and now I'm out there doing it again.
Excellent. How's the reaction like nowadays? How do you find you have a lot of fans from the Daddy Cool days of Mondo Rock, or is it a whole new sort of a generation?
There are a lot of fans from both those periods. In fact, you find it's, for me, the current challenge is to connect all the dots. That's why I'm releasing this album called Now Listen, which is like a history of Ross Wilson. It goes right from the very early days through the mainstream stuff of Daddy Cool and Mondo Rock and solo things and some new tracks and rare things, because I find that anybody over 35 will go, oh yeah, or say 30 up, they go, oh, Mondo Rock, yeah, I know them. And then people who are like over 40, they'll go like, oh, Daddy Cool, yeah, they were fantastic. And then when you say, what about Ross Wilson? They go, yeah, he's pretty good too. And you say, well, he played in both those things as well as doing his own thing. And they go, did he? And they go, oh yeah. So like this new album's an exercise in like showing that I was there in all of those eras and I'm still around. And that if you join the dots, it actually makes up a pretty interesting picture. And it all does connect. So that's my current exercise.
Thanks a lot, Ross, for taking time out to join us on the show.